Imagine waking up one morning to birds chirping outside your window, children laughing as they walk to school, and cars peacefully driving to work. Now imagine that same scene, except there's a nondescript field, where the children play and where people occasionally come to walk their dogs. And this field is adjacent to a busy road, where cars frequently speed by. But despite the heavy traffic, no one notices the plastic bag hidden in the tall grass. A bag that when opened reveals a horrific sight, a torso that had been brutally dismembered. This is exactly what happened in 1981 in San Jose, California. The discovery of the torso shocked the tight-knit community, and investigators were immediately called to the scene. But before we jump into the details of this case, let's take a step back and learn about the victim. Vivian Moss was born on August 6, 1950. She grew up in San Jose and attended James Lick High School, where she was known for her infectious laugh and bubbly personality. At just 30 years old at the time of her disappearance, Vivian worked as an administrative assistant at a law firm. Her colleagues remember her as a dedicated worker who was always willing to lend a helping hand. Vivian had recently moved into a small apartment near downtown San Jose with her 2 cats. Although she didn't have any close ties to the area, she quickly made friends with her neighbors. In the weeks leading up to her disappearance, Vivian had confided in her friends that she was having some problems with her boyfriend, Charles. They had been dating for several months, and he was known for his charming good looks and charismatic personality. But behind closed doors, Charles was a different person. He was possessive and controlling, often calling Vivian at work to make sure she was doing exactly what he wanted. In fact, on the day Vivian disappeared, she was scheduled to break up with Charles, which may have played a role in her disappearance. On April 17, 1981, Vivian left her home around 7 a.m. to go to work. She was never seen alive again. Her car was later found parked in the lot of her workplace, but there was no sign of Vivian. Initially, her family assumed that she had simply left her job early and gone out for the day. However, when she didn't return home that night, they began to worry. By the next morning, Vivian had been missing for over 24 hours, and her family contacted the police. As officers began to investigate, they learned that Vivian had been involved in a hit-and-run accident a few days prior to her disappearance. This could have potentially led to her disappearance. But it didn't make much sense, as the accident had been reported, and Vivian had continued on with her life as usual. Her family and friends also told the police about Charles, the abusive boyfriend who had been harassing Vivian in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. Despite this information, Charles was not considered a suspect at the time, likely because he had a solid alibi. As the days turned into weeks, the police were still unable to find any trace of Vivian. Her family and friends were desperate for answers, but it seemed like the case was going nowhere. That's when something shocking happened that would turn the case upside down. On May 15, 1981, a man walking his dog in an open field off the busy Highway 85 spotted a plastic bag hidden in the tall grass. When he pulled it out, he found a torso that had been brutally dismembered. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community. Everyone was wondering who the torso belonged to and how it ended up in that field. The police were able to determine that the torso belonged to a woman between the ages of 25 and 35. But despite extensive efforts, they were unable to identify her. The lack of identification was particularly puzzling. As the media quickly picked up the story and published details about the gruesome discovery, Vivian's family saw the news and knew in their hearts that this was their worst nightmare come true, but they needed proof. They begged the police to do everything they could to identify the body, and as the weeks passed, the police were finally able to get a break. After conducting an autopsy and examining the clothing and personal belongings found on the body, the coroner was able to make an identification. They had a name, but they couldn't publicly release it due to privacy concerns. However, they did release a description of the woman, which matched Vivian exactly. It was her, but the question still remained: who could have done this to her, and why? As the investigation continued, the police learned that Vivian had been stabbed multiple times before her killer cut up her body. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come. Fingerprints lifted from the victim's car revealed that Charles, the ex-boyfriend, had been in her car the day she disappeared. Suddenly, Charles became the prime suspect in the case, and the police began to piece together what really happened that day. It turns out that Charles had been following Vivian to her work when she broke up with him. Enraged by her decision to end their relationship, he confronted her in her workplace parking lot. A struggle ensued and Charles stabbed Vivian multiple times. In a fit of rage, he then cut up her body and disposed of it in the field near the highway. With the evidence stacked against him, Charles was arrested and charged with murder. However, despite the circumstantial evidence, Charles maintained his innocence. He claimed that he had been at work at the time of Vivian's disappearance and that he had nothing to do with her death. The defense argued that the prosecution's case was based on speculation, and that there was no concrete evidence linking Charles to the crime. Ultimately, the jury agreed with the defense, and Charles was acquitted of all charges. Although Charles was acquitted of murder, he became the prime suspect in Vivian's disappearance. But without any concrete evidence, the case went cold. For the next 4 decades, Vivian's family never gave up hope that her killer would be brought to justice. They held vigils every year on the anniversary of her disappearance and pleaded with anyone with information to come forward. In the meantime, advancements in DNA technology gave investigators new hope. In 2025, after 44 years, a breakthrough finally occurred. Using new DNA technology, investigators were able to extract a DNA profile from the bones found in the field. They then used genealogy websites to build a family tree and identify potential relatives of the victim. After months of investigation, they were finally able to identify the remains as belonging to Vivian Moss. The news of the identification brought a mixture of emotions to Vivian's family. On one hand, they were finally able to lay their loved one to rest after all these years. But on the other hand, the reality that her killer still hadn't been brought to justice was heartbreaking. To this day, the case remains unsolved. The police are still searching for whoever is responsible for Vivian's death. Now you might be asking yourself, why am I telling you this story? Why should you care about some cold case from the 70s? Well, this case isn't just a relic of the past. It's a reminder that even after 44 years, a cold case can still bring a family justice. Advances in DNA technology are giving police new hope in solving these types of cases, but it's also crucial that we don't forget the victims. Vivian's case had been on the back burner for decades, but thanks to the hard work of her family, the police, and advancements in technology, she was finally identified. So what are your thoughts on this case? Do you think that technology will eventually lead to the arrest of Vivian's killer? Or will her case remain unsolved forever? Let me know your thoughts below. And if you enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe button so you never miss another episode. Thanks for watching.